The coronavirus situation in Australia has been a lot of concern over the last several days about the situation in Victoria in particular, with about 6 days now, I think, of double-digit increases in the number of new cases. So 2 Melbourne primary schools have been closed this morning after a student at each facility was diagnosed with coronavirus. Reporter Steph Ferrier joins us now from Melbourne. Steph, g'day, what's the latest?
Yes, good morning, Joe. Well, we've received confirmation from the Education Department that 2 students at those schools, East Brunswick Primary School in Melbourne's north and Keilor Views Primary School in Melbourne's northwest, have tested positive. Those 2 schools have closed for at least 3 days for a deep clean to occur, as well as for health authorities to closely trace all of those close contacts and isolate them if required. Now, we haven't heard yet as to what grade levels those students are in because the Education Department is citing privacy concerns. But of course, those 2 schools are in 2 of the 6 local government areas which have been identified as coronavirus hotspots here in Melbourne. Yesterday, we saw 16 new cases of coronavirus, 6 of those related to known outbreaks. And of course, health authorities here are really scrambling to try to prevent us tipping into that dreaded second wave. They've got health worker teams as well as police reinforcements and extra mobile testing sites springing up around those 6 local government areas which have been classified as corona hotspots. Now, they are Hume as well as Darebin and Moreland in the north, slightly to the west, Brimbank Council area, and also in the Melbourne southeastern suburbs, Casey and Cardinia. So what we have seen is that this spike in cases really has come about as a result of extended family gatherings, as well as people who have been tested and tested positive for coronavirus not then doing the right thing and going straight home and staying there. Now, among those latest cases were 2 teachers that were at the Alban Vale Primary School, which is in the city of Brimbank. That's not that far away from Keilor Views Primary School, this latest primary school affected. And it's believed that that might be involved with the Keilor Downs family cluster. So Keilor Downs is a particular suburb that is really causing great concern. Now, multicultural groups are really pleased with the government's announcement that they're going to send out health teams to door knock this area and explain to the very large multicultural communities exactly what assistance might be around for people who want to be able to support themselves. So there's a financial hardship fund for those in case they are worried about how they're going to look after themselves financially while they're awaiting test results. And that's particularly important because a lot of these elderly residents and elderly people in these communities aren't able to speak English very well, so the message hasn't really got through that well. And of course, what we've seen is these really long queues snaking out of shopping centres, one in Northland. So Victorians are really heeding the call here to ensure that they do go out and get tested at the mildest possible symptom, which is great news to see, but it also has overwhelmed some of those health workers. And that's prompted the state's Health Minister, Jenny Makakos, here to announce extended opening times for those mobile testing clinics and for those shopping testing clinics, as well as setting up new ones in places like Craigieburn in the Melbourne northern suburbs, which is one of those hotspots for coronavirus.
And Steph, up until a couple of days ago, there'd been a fair bit of optimism about the borders, internal borders for Australia opening up sooner rather than later. What's this Victorian experience over the last couple of days meant for those plans?
Well, hasn't it really put a halt to that idea, Joe? Because what we have seen is Mark McGowan, of course, over in the Western Australia, the Premier there, he was mooted to be looking at August the 8th as a possible time for reopening the borders. Well, that's off the table now as a result of these coronavirus cases. In South Australia, Stephen Marshall, the Premier there, he's in a meeting, a transition meeting today, and he'll have another one on Friday. Now, they were planning to open their borders borders on July the 10th in South Australia to all states and territories. The Australian Medical Association is saying we shouldn't be doing that because of what's happening in Victoria, and particularly not to allow Victorians to cross the border as a result of this spike. So that's still, he does say that is going ahead, that border reopening, but he is watching very carefully. And of course there are these two meetings, and up in Queensland, well, they have actually designated the entire 40 local government areas here in Melbourne as corona hotspots, not just the 6 that have been identified. So that's really causing issues in terms of people trying to head up north as well. So we are seeing a lot of that, and of course this is coming just in the last week of school here in Victoria before school holidays hit. We also heard that, of course, even those people within those local council zones, they're being urged not to even move further afield within Victoria, let alone go interstate. And let's have a listen to what the Federal Health Minister, Greg Hunt, had to say about moves during school holidays.
You might go on holidays, but please don't put the distancing rules on holidays. The 1.5 metres remains essential. The cough etiquette remains essential. And if you are ill, please don't go on holidays. If you are ill, please don't go to work or prior to the holidays to school. And if you are ill, please get tested.
So that testing while you've got mild symptoms call really coming out thick and strong at the moment. And of course, even places like the ski fields, they opened on Monday for their ski season. Well, they're looking forward to having visitors, but they certainly don't want anybody who is sick who could potentially infect communities up there too.
The World Health Organization has warned that the coronavirus pandemic is still accelerating and that its economic effects would be felt for decades to come. The WHO's Director General has called for a more global approach to getting the pandemic under control.
It took more than 3 months for the first 1 million cases to be reported. The last 1 million cases were reported in just 8 days. But we know the pandemic is so much more than a health crisis. It's an economic crisis, a social crisis, and in many countries, a political crisis. The greatest threat we face now is not the virus itself. It's the lack of global solidarity and global leadership. We cannot defeat this pandemic with a divided world. Together, we must work to ensure the lessons of this pandemic is learned.
And a spokesman for US President Donald Trump says he has not directed any slowdown in coronavirus testing, despite the president making the claim during a rally on the weekend. 2 more staff members who worked on the Oklahoma rally have now tested positive for COVID-19. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany says the president was making a joke about slowing down the rate of testing.
It was a comment that he made in jest. It's a comment that he made in passing, specifically with regard to the media coverage and pointing out the fact that the media never acknowledges that we have more cases because when you test more people, you find more cases.
Is it appropriate to joke about coronavirus when 120,000 people have died?
He was not joking about coronavirus. I just said he was joking about the media.
Saudi Arabia has announced that the annual Hajj pilgrimage will go ahead at the end of July, but with attendance reduced because of the pandemic. A limited number of pilgrims of various nationalities who already live in Saudi Arabia will be allowed to attend. More than 2 million Muslims from around the world usually take part in the pilgrimage to Mecca. Several countries have already said their citizens cannot travel to the religious event.